honoured to have in the Design Notes studio today the podfather of gaming, the ex-head of Stronghold Games, the man who brought things like Space Cadets to the world, a man of refinement and beer, Stephen Buonocore. Stephen, welcome to the Design Notes studio.
You flatter me too much, sir. Thank you so much for having me. I thoroughly enjoy your company because we have met each other a number of times over in Europe. So this should be great. Thank you for having me, Ben.
So you're obviously an understated man of modesty, but I'd ask you for just a second here to put that to the side and to, give yourself a little bit of license to brag. So my first question is when did you know that you were good at what you do?
I don't know that it took that long to say, okay, this is going to work, because our first few games, hit on all cylinders. We came out of the gate strong with Survive, Escape from Atlantis, of course. That was the one that kind of put us on the map. But just before that, we had Code 777, and then right after that, Confusion. And all of those games we got to the company because they were games that were being demanded by gamers again. They were all out of print. So we went out, found the designers, and brought them back to the gaming world. And that was the beginning model. So we wanted to be sure that we could get ourselves on the map, because if you've got a great game by a great designer, but who's this company, Stronghold? And this is back in the day when there was no funding, no crowdfunding, right? You had to bring your own capital to the table. So if we can have two of those three things like firing, and then people say, oh, I'll take a chance with these guys. And, it worked out. To be good at this takes a bunch of skills, but certainly just simply having some amount of business sense. Sadly, at that time, there were a bunch of companies that were doing this that really, it was like the Wild West. Some people just didn't understand that, well, you have to count. And if the amount of money you bring in is not greater than the amount of money that it costs you, you're not going to do a good job in this. You have to make money in business. It's the only way to survive. So I was watching the market. We were seeing that there were companies not doing well. There were some that were doing it very well. Rio Grande Games were bringing games across to America. Z-Man, my good buddy Zev, who owned Z-Man, of course, at the time, started it. He was doing a good job. I figured I would look at those models and I'd say, okay, this is a route into the industry. Now just count the numbers and make sure that when you bring out a game, it will make money when you sell those games over time. And everything ended up working out, of course.
And so, right from the beginning, I got sort of into gaming kind of around 2011, 2012. And when I got into gaming, of course, the first place I went to was the Dice Tower. And of course, you were already present there. You were going on shows and being a guest and everything. I mean, how much did you consider, leveraging new media to put your face out there so people would know about Stronghold Games?
So when you're starting something like this, you're not exactly running out and hiring a chief financial officer. That's you. You're not going out and hiring a chief marketing officer. That's you. So everything has got to be based on what you can do in your skill set. And certainly one of my skill sets is creating relationships and selling. And I don't mean selling as in I'm going to take this game and sell it to you, but the marketing of it to use my personality in a public way to make people excited. So what I did, it was the most specific thing that I did. I went onto every podcast that I could go on. If you had a podcast that it was your mom and your best friend listened, I'm going to be on that podcast. And of course, I wanted to also be on the biggest ones. And, the D6 generation, the Dice Tower, of course. Tom and I started out faux rivalry really early on. And people at the beginning kind of thought it was real too, which was kind of, we didn't like each other. Of course, that's never been the case. We love each other. So getting myself out there and being on all of these shows, video and many, many podcasts was the marketing that I can do easily, because that's just time. I don't have to throw money at something that may or may not work. If I can get to people who not only want to buy new games, but I can get to people that in their spare time, when they're not playing games, they're listening to other idiots talk about games. That's the gamer that I really wanted to be with. And that's, by the way, how I got the name The Podfather. I didn't give it to myself. All of the podcasters out there were saying, you are the Podfather, which is a colliding of podcast and Godfather, the Italian-American heritage that I have. They gave me that name. So in retirement, I grabbed it and I called myself the Podfather of gaming. Other people call themselves the Podfather in various other places. So all of that together was a deliberate thing to make sure that I got onto these podcasts and I spoke about games and I can show people the passion and love I have and talk about these new games so that they would become forefront in people's minds.
So it's that old Jerry Seinfeld joke that he says, a person, the biggest fear that people have is speaking in public. The second fear they have is dying. And so at a funeral, people would rather be in the casket than talking and than giving the eulogy. But I mean, it seemed to me when I saw you sort of go on podcasts and go on the Dice Tower and stuff, it was fairly effortless. I mean, before you got into Stronghold and publishing, have you always been this sort of gregarious character and outgoing?
That's a great question. Take a look around me. I don't see anybody here. I don't see anybody behind you. So this kind of interaction is really where I excel the absolute most. I love, and it's part of, why I am and many people are gamers. We sit around tables, we hang out, we socialize. So this interaction with you and with podcasters, and everything up to the point of going onto a stage, up to that point, before that point, is effortless because I call myself a raging extrovert. I love to be around people. People fuel me and my energy. Sure, we all need downtime after a wild session of socializing and gaming too. We'll need some downtime, but this kind of stuff definitely fuels me and my personality. I did have, and still do, don't get me wrong, it's not the easiest thing for me to get up on a stage and start talking, or for that matter, singing. I at Gen Con 2019, I did a thing called Rock and Rollin' Right. I introduced some Rollin' Rights to the whole crowd. I dressed up as Elton John, and I got on stage, and I sang a song to begin. I sang a song in the middle of the whole 2-hour thing, and I sang a song to close out the whole thing. All Elton John songs. I'm a big fan of Elton John, and of course the flamboyance and all that. That was hard to do. I just want to make people happy. I think happiness is like the one thing that to me games bring to the world, and if I can entertain people in this setting in gaming, I'll play the fool. I'll banter with Tom or people on a stage. I'll get past my fears, and that's just going to show more of my passion for what we do here in gaming.
And so, how hard was the pandemic for you, being a raging extrovert?
Yeah, really interesting. What I did during the pandemic, one of the things that I adopted very early on, and remember, I was still working at the time. Early 2020, right? About 2 years ago. Right now, all of a sudden, the first time we heard about this coronavirus thing, and the disease is called COVID-19. It's almost 2 years to the day that it became part of the zeitgeist of everybody. What I immediately did, I took to the airwaves. I took to YouTube, and using at that time the Stronghold Games YouTube channel, I created a happy hour at the Stronghold. We called it way back then. And literally, I just invited everybody out there to simply join and to just chat about their lives. What's going on? What do you fear? Hey, are you getting in gaming? What would you like to do when this is all over? Because we know this is all going to be over within the next 3 months. Nobody had a clue, right? We stayed together as that group And by the way, and we had as many as 50 people show up. We had as few as 15 people show up, but we continued maintaining this decent number of people throughout. Some people would come for a while, then they leave, come back. I did that for 15 months, twice a week, every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern, religiously. Might have missed a couple of times where I just simply wasn't available, but literally twice a week, 15 months. I tried to keep people happy. I tried to keep people sane. I tried to keep me sane because, really, while I had more outlets than other people, Florida in the winter is beautiful. I can go
Right.
out all the time. I can go to dinner at a restaurant and eat outside. And we did that because that's what you do in Florida. A lot of people did stay, even in Florida, stayed locked up. We were able to get out and do things to a certain extent. But I kept myself sane by staying present online and bringing people into my world and getting into people's worlds to help them with getting them through the entire thing.
So let's go back to Stronghold then, because, at the beginning, Stronghold was publishing these out-of-print games. You were kind of a proto Restoration Games to some degree. When was the point when Stronghold sort of really established its identity and you started to sign contemporary publishers and publish original games?
I mean, after we brought out those first 3 games that I've mentioned already, and of course Survive being the big hit, which, by the way, continues to sell at a very good rate. Even, that's now 2010 through now. That's almost 13 years later, in its 13th year at least. At that point, the name was on the map. And remember, of course, the field of publishers was also much smaller. And immediately, by the way, Stronghold was in Europe. We not only did we have worldwide distribution via our sales and fulfillment and warehousing agent PSI, you could get Stronghold all over the world. We specifically went out to Essen to be there because, of course, the games are going to be more expensive there, so people can pick them up directly from us and meet the faces of the company, me specifically, and simply interact more with the public. I think that really, once we got out there and people saw us out there, especially a year into that whole cycle, because we were out there starting in 2011, 2010, and every year after that, people were like, wow, these guys are really on the map. And at that point, of course, we started taking meetings with all the European publishers to establish relationships with them, as well as with European designers, to see what we could bring in. It was a combination of all 3 of these aspects of how we brought games into the catalog. It was the reprinting of old games. It was the licensing of games from European publishers, and that became really the biggest portion. And of course, finding new games from known designers at first, and then lesser known designers, because we just wanted to work, with everybody.
And so, can you give us an overview of the process of licensing a game from a European publisher? How did you go about getting the rights to these big Euro games?
Sure. And it's not rocket science, but it is about, being someone that people want to work with. I think that I come across as a genuine person, and I am. I like to say that I really am. What you see is what you get with me. And in any deal that I'm going to make sure that it works for Stronghold, of course, but it works for the other company as well. I'm going to bring my personality, my marketing, and my sales ability to bear on whatever title that we end up getting from this other European or Asian publisher. When we started going out to Essen, I scoured the releases, Board Game Geek. What a great tool that is for everybody. You think that only gamers, just regular, ordinary gamers It's a great tool for them. It's a great tool for a publisher, a small publisher who's looking and hungry to find new games. We'd look at that list that Eric Martin put together, that publishers say, hey, we're going to be premiering these new games. We're going to be carrying these new games over in Essen. It was like God talked to me. It was like the Bible. I read those lists and I got through them. And I'm like, ooh, this one sounds interesting. Oh, look at the number of thumbs that this title has out there in Essen. I got to meet with that publisher, that maybe established publisher or this like one-off company that is like got this new game, but everybody's talking about it. And I went out and met them first in email or, first on Board Game Geek exchanges, then in emails, set up a meeting, meet them in Essen, tell them what we could do for them. Let me see a game, give me a game, and we will review it. We will check it out, play it, and we'll get back to you if we can do this game with you. And we obviously had a lot of success in creating relationships. And that's like, I'm going to underscore that one a bunch of times. Creating relationships with so many people in the game industry that people said, oh, I'd like to work with Stephen Buonocore. I'd like to work with Stronghold Games because he's a straight shooter and he'll do the right thing for my IP and we'll do the right thing for his IP if it was going in the other direction.
So I want to talk about what became very quickly Stronghold's flagship title. That was Terraforming Mars. What was the story behind getting Terraforming Mars? And then secondly, how surprised were you that it blew up in the way that it did?
So the story is really interesting on how that title ended up with us in our catalog and us getting worldwide English rights to that, which obviously has paid off very, very well. Frank Jaeger, who is the export manager at Ludofact Germany. So, Ludofact Germany is probably the single largest printer of board games in the world. So I was working with Ludofact Germany, and they said to me, we were working and printing many games. And Frank came to me and said, I know these young guys in Sweden that they've got a game about space. I know you do a lot of space games, Stephen. So you want to talk to them? I'm like, of course I'll talk to them. Of course I will. So we met in Essen in 2014. Correct, 2014. And we struck up a conversation about the game. And, it was not truly a space game, right? It's a game about science, projected science technologies that could do this potential scientific thing 400 to 800 years later, right? That's when Terraforming Mars is set. 2400s, the 2400s through the 2800s, if you calculate the generations that you go in a game. So he said, let me take the game. As usual, we take it, we bring it back, we play the game. We're like, wow, okay, this game's got some potential here. It's got some very interesting new things going on. It's scientifically based, but projected into the future. Lots of stuff going on here, but the game was good. It wasn't great yet. So what I convinced Fricks Games to do, and Fricks Games, of course, was the company, what I convinced them is like, let me put my best Euro developer on this. Now, this is a person, his name is Jeff Gamble. He was not working for me, but, we would play test games together. I would compensate him a little bit as he did certain things, mostly in pizza and beer and love and gaming. But we would do some work together on various games, especially on the heavier side. And he worked with them for over a year to make this game really ready. They wanted to bring it out in Essen 2015, and that would have been a mistake. We ended up waiting until 2016, and we had a few copies, a couple of hundred copies, 300 maybe the number was, at Origins, which is pretty early, right? The early part of the 2016 convention season. And we printed those. The first game printed at Ludofact USA, which happens to be only a few miles from Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where which is near Gen Con, but they were able to truck them from Columbus, Ohio, which is not too far. It's several hours to Columbus, Ohio. We got them there. Then we had a lot of them at Gen Con, and then the big European, I guess, push happened in Essen 2016, where it really hit the scenes and people were ravenous for the game. And of course, we sold out at all of these conventions. So it's a great story of, again, creating great relationships within the industry, knowing that a game was an excellent game but needed some more development, and finally working till it was finally in the right place. And then we had the problem, of course, keeping it in stock because the demand was way more than we could have ever anticipated, which is part of your question. Like, when did we know it was going to be big? You hear buzz, you hear people talking about it. And for the most part, we said, okay, this is going to be big. I'll make the biggest print run that I've made on any brand new game to date. We'll go with that. The demand was twice that for our copies. Okay, sold out immediately, was allocated into distribution. I'll make twice that print run for the second one. Obviously, that'll fulfill demand. The demand was twice that again. So the buzz kept going and going. People might say, did you constrain supply? I absolutely did not constrain supply. I could not predict these numbers. Finally, on the third printing, when we printed that the double number, 4 times the original printing, we were able to get the demand curve correct. And then we kept printing in large quantities to continue to fulfill demand. The game, again, of course, still sells lots and lots of copies over time, doing great. And it made Stronghold a target for a merger with Indie Boards and Cards. And with others, we did not speak to only Indie Boards and Cards around that time or before that time.
Well, I'm going to come on to that in a second, but because of something you just said. So it happened with Terraforming Mars, and then the next sort of super big hit was sort of Wingspan came after that. The next game that was kind of a phenomenon, not just a success. And both games were marred by shortages of supply. I don't subscribe to the conspiracy theories that the publishers are deliberately constraining supply, because why would you? You want to sell as many as possible, right? But do you think that constrained supply sparks FOMO in people and aids the sale of the game fundamentally?
Yes, I do. And I'm going to be honest. Again, I'm a straight shooter. I'm honest. However, I mean, yes, it does that. It makes people even more ravenous for something that they can't get. And I bet that helped the final sales. However, even if I had put all of the supply out that I could have put on the first run, I mean, let me think. Maybe if I would have printed, I mean, the numbers would have been so great. If I would have printed the full 4 times the original printing, which is unheard of. You don't do that as a small publisher. We still would have sold out within the year. And we would have had to figure out, okay, we're going to print how much again. So certainly it kept it in everybody's mindset. Oh my God, I really want this. Oh my God, people are playing this. I played it with my buddy's copy. I have to have this thing. So yes, what you're saying is 100% right. But if people are thinking that we're doing it on purpose, I'm sorry, you're a conspiracy theorist. We're not. We're in the business of selling games. We want to sell games. We want you to be happy buying games. Why would we piss you off by not giving you a game? We're not doing that. It's just that when a publisher prints a game, and this is the biggest takeaway I think I can give to anybody out there, including new publishers, when you print a game, you better have a vehicle to sell that game. Because every time you print a game, you're putting your entire company at risk when you're a small publisher. You overprint and you sell 500 copies of your 5,000 print run, just picking numbers, you're in trouble. You got 4,500 copies sitting on a shelf in a warehouse collecting dust, costing you money, and that's your capital sitting there. How do you get rid of them? You're going to give them away to conventions? Well, that's a recipe for disaster, that you're just giving away all the money you just put up. You're going to reduce your price somehow to make distributors happier about it. It's just a very hard thing to do once you've got that inventory to move dead inventory. It's terrible. You can't overprint.
So, people know sort of about, especially if they listen to my podcast, in fact, about the merger with Indie Boards and Cards. But I wanted to ask you something connected to that, but sort of about a trend that happens in these sorts of situations. So it happened with Z-Man, it happened with Fantasy Flight, it happened with Stronghold. That there's a merger, and then the head of that company, within relatively short periods of time, no longer works for the company. Did you know that going into the merger with Indie Boards and Cards, that it was a short-term thing, and within a year and a half, 2 years, you were gonna leave? Or is that just an inevitable thing of the merger that things get shaken up, I guess?
100% knew exactly that we were going to merge the companies, and then over time, I was going to back myself away. Well, now we changed that timeline for no other reason than they didn't need me there any longer. We had set up a phenomenal team, and Travis Worthington, CEO, he got it. He knew what he was doing. We put in place together Sydney Engelstein, right? Jeff Engelstein's daughter, who's a brilliant young person. We put her in there, basically taking over my role, and she's a designer, and she's a developer. All of it was in place from the moment we inked the contract. And the only thing that changed, and I'm being completely straight, the only thing that changed is we accelerated the timeline. We had first had a 4-year plan that I would work my butt off for 3 years, and then that last year we would do the shaking hands and kissing babies and kind of saying, I'm going to be retiring soon. After a year and a half, it was evident that they had it, and I was the biggest expense to the company. I didn't need to be working due to the contracts of the merger and how well it all worked out. So I said, Travis, how about if I retire a little early? He's like, sounds good to me. So it was about a year, just a year into the whole thing. He said, well, why don't I accelerate it and make this my last shaking hands and kissing babies year, and then we'll announce a retirement sometime, in 2020. And that's exactly what happened. And in August 1st of 2020 was going to be at Gen Con of that year, which didn't happen. We were going to have big fanfare at my retirement party. Didn't happen. I'm not too upset by that. Yeah, I wish I had my retirement. No, I'm only kidding. Didn't matter. I did a retirement party online with people at Board Game Geek and friends like that. So it all worked out essentially as perfectly as it could have worked out. Very happy in all regards, and that I promise you and everybody listening.
So when I went to Essen, and when I go to Essen, I do interviews with people, and I always made sure to get in contact with you and, grab you at some point during the convention. And you were always, because Stronghold was there sort of before I got into gaming, you were always a fixture. And the next Essen will be probably, last year was a bit of a misnomer because it wasn't really Essen because it was small, but next year will be this year will be the first Essen without you in the red polo. Is there any part of you that misses it and that would like to go back to the grind of running the game company?
Okay. First part, I'm telling you right now, Ben, we're going to see each other this year in Essen. I mean, unless, of course, you can never guarantee those things, especially these days. But I'm going. I want to see all my friends, and I want to see gamers, and I do stay relevant on some level, with the Podfather Gaming. I'm wearing my logoed shirt right here, right? I still go. I went to most of the conventions last year. I did not fly out to Europe because it was still weird, as you said. I was at Gen Con. And I was at a bunch of them last year. I went BGG Con, and so I went to lots of conventions last year. And I'm planning on going to Essen this year. Is there a part of me that wants to be in the grind? And that's a very specific word. And I'm going to say no. I'm enjoying my life. I'm treating myself very well. I'm not as young as you are. I'm not as young as a lot of people out there. At some point, you need to take the step back. You need to enjoy life more. I enjoyed, of course, running Stronghold. And of course, I enjoyed, that sense of I'm going to do this and I'm going to make this better and stuff. But, I didn't enjoy waking up in the middle of the night sweating, thinking, Are my games going to make it to the convention? Is that container going to be able to make it to street date? And literally that's what happened every night. Every day, every night, you have these huge amounts of stress. Now my stress is I wake up in the middle of the night saying, why can't I sleep through the night? I'm just getting old. Sometimes you just can't sleep through the night. I don't have the stresses anymore. I relax. I enjoy Florida. I enjoy my house. We remodel the house. I buy fast cars. And I just enjoy life right now. I travel, all of these things. And I can do the fun things of gaming. I can just game. I've got my big game library. I can pick whatever I want. I don't have to worry about playing prototypes. I can play everybody else's games. I can play Stronghold, everybody else's. I can do anything I want in gaming, and I can create some content. With Ignacy, Board Games Insider, we still do it. We still love doing that, and I do things like this. Do you know I'm doing 3 things like this week? 2 today alone. I did an interview yesterday. I'm being interviewed here today, and I'm playing an online game with someone else later on today. So I can just do this and have fun doing it and give a little back to the community without being salesy, other than telling people, well, check out my YouTube channel, The Podfather of Gaming, listen to the podcast with Ignacy, watch the Dice Tower. That's my extent of my sales. You don't have to go buy games. Just let's hang out and talk and be friends online or in person at conventions.
I'd be very disappointed if you didn't manage to slip in a plug at some point. So, 2 more questions then. So, say, imagine you're at Essen this year, and you're at a restaurant in the evening, maybe having a couple of beers.
Maybe the Rüttenscheider Hausbrauerei, for instance.
Indeed.
I think my German was almost okay there. Almost.
I am far too classy to correct your pronunciation. So you're coming back from the loo, and you hear a table of gamers, and you hear your name mentioned. So you sidle into a corner and you eavesdrop on their conversation. What do you hope they're saying about you?
Oh, so they didn't see me. For some reason, they just mentioned my name?
Exactly.
Oh, wow. I would be actually extremely surprised if anybody randomly mentioned my name. People scream my name out as I walk through the halls of a convention. Dice Tower West, I literally could not walk back to the hotel, which, is a quarter of a mile almost through the halls of the convention center. It's a pretty long walk. Couldn't walk through those halls without getting 3-5 people saying, Buonocore, Podfather, how's it going? Which makes me feel so good. But to answer your question more directly, I hope they're saying something like, I met Buonocore, I met the Podfather, at the booth or walking around. He is as nice as it sounds, when he's on things. He wanted to take a picture with me, not only me taking a picture with him, because as soon as somebody says hello to me, I'm like, can we take a selfie? I take a selfie. I post it in my stuff, like meeting new friends, seeing old friends at conventions. So that's the kind of thing I want people to, in the end, even more than say, and they do this, and they do very nicely say this, thank you for your contribution to the hobby. Just say, wow, Buonocore really is the kind of guy that he sounds like. He's a good guy. He's a nice guy, and he just wants to be happy with gamers. I'd like that to be my legacy as much as anything else.
So, last question then. Why is gaming good?
Gaming is good for me based on the fact that I get to be Buonocore. I get to be the social, raging extrovert. I get to hang out with my friends. We get to compete, or we get to cooperate across a table, possibly with an adult beverage as we do so. We enjoy each other's company. This is great. But going a little further, almost onto a more anatomical level, kind of weird way to put that, gaming is good because it exercises your mind. And I really think that people who game, especially game on some of the heavier, thinkier things, but not necessarily just all of it, you're exercising your brain, which is something that, as we know, is going to decline over time. The more you do that, the sharper you're going to stay, I think. So for that reason alone, keep gaming and keep socializing and keep spending time with people and love life. And that's my final message to you all.
Brilliant. So you've already sort of mentioned what you're doing at the moment, but if people want to get hold of you, they want to listen to what you do, how can they go about doing that?
I appreciate everybody out there who would even want to do so. My contribution these days is simply to give back to people, to give back doing things like this, to give back on my podcast because we talk about the industry. So that's Board Games Insider. It's with Ignacy Chevicek, right, the president of Portal Games, and Stephen Buonocore, the podfather of gaming. You can get us wherever you like to get your podcasts, or recently, within the last year and a half or so, we have put the podcast also onto YouTube. So you can look at us, if you'd rather like look and have almost feel like you're having a conversation with us on YouTube. It's a little more raw that way. We don't edit it, but you're still going to get the entire experience in an hour. And then the podcast will do it in about 45 minutes because it's slightly more edited. So check us out there. Check both of us out on Board Games Insider, my YouTube channel in general. I post other things besides the Board Games Insider podcast. So please subscribe over at the Podfather of Gaming YouTube channel. We have the Podfather of Gaming page on Facebook and its associated group, the Podfather of Gaming group. And that's where we literally hang out, keep it light, talk about things that are happening. I don't do the happy hour with the Podfather any longer because I'm hoping that people are getting out there again. They're getting back out, trying to live their lives again. Hopefully COVID is starting to get back into that rear view mirror now that we don't have to worry quite as much about it. Still be diligent, of course, with what you do. So come hang out with us at the Podfather of Gaming Facebook group and just chat about everything that you're playing and everything you're doing. And the final thing is on Twitter and on Instagram. It's at Podfather Gaming. I post nice, fun pictures and things of me at conventions with people and things like that. Thank you, Ben, so much for having me. It's been great. It really has.